Check, 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 check.
We're supposed to go see my son tomorrow. Andy's doing amoxicillin. I don't know if it's strep or something else. Are you really?
Me? Am I working? Oh, yeah, I'm
now.
working. Oh, boy.
How about me? Yep. I can hear me.
See when it's sticking away from your face like that? So this piece right here, that's that. Needs to go behind your earlobe. Okay. Can you do it? And that's on video in case you want to find the last.
I like, it is interesting how you approach it all the way though, because you come over and you go, is it okay?
Oh, absolutely.
So I think you're good.
I learned that teaching also, like showing people hammer techniques and things. I always say, can I have permission to touch your hands? Because, cause trauma. All right, everybody ready? All right, so we'll call to order the meeting. This is Friday, December 28th, and we'll start with a pledge, and then we'll have unless there's someone here for the invocation, we'll have a minute of mindful silence and get underway. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's proceed. Roll call, please, Carol.
Vice Mayor Amy Speak. Here. Councilmember Bill Lusk.
Here.
Councilmember Susanna Murdoch.
Here.
Councilmember Robert Spalding is absent. And Mayor Dan Lambert.
Here. All right, so we start with citizens' opportunity to address council. If anyone's interested.
Don't all get up at once.
Or, and if you're going to sing, that'd be better. All right. We'll close that portion and move to board appointments under resolutions.
And there are two of those.
Mayor, if I may, as a lead-in, one of our last meetings, there was some confusion about the MAC board. We kind of went back and looked at that and nailed down the scenario. We had two Beckys on that board, and Becky Young came off, and somehow Becky Pope also got removed. So that we caught that, and we then sent her a letter asking if she wanted to be reappointed, and she does. And then that left what happened with Seth. There was Mike Rose moved out of town and moved away, so he's no longer on the board. So Seth will actually be finishing out his term. So we're changing Seth to a one-year term to finish Mike's, and then reappointing Becky as we did all of the others that asked to be reappointed to the boards.
So we voted on these at the regular meeting, but we're going to go ahead and vote on these now, just to get this done? Or are we going to?
Yes, that's fine. The one for Seth is a correction, once we figured out that error had been made. And then with Becky, I went ahead and put it on the agenda and had it ready because the board agreed to appoint any of the existing members that wanted to be reappointed. So unless there's something particular about this one, I felt you could go ahead and vote on it as well, but it is entirely council's prerogative which way you want to do it.
All right, I'll read the headers and then we'll entertain a motion. A resolution reappointing Becky Pope, the town, should be to the Town of Signal Mountains Arts Community Center Board. Right? A resolution, that's the first one. And a resolution revising Resolution 2018-49 and correcting term on the appointment of Seth Graham as a member of the Town of Signal Mountains Arts Community Center Board.
Motion to approve?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries 5-0.
4.
4-0, thank you. Math is not my best thing. So Boyd, you'll have to take over on this one. This is a resolution about the temporary use of a right-of-way on Georgia Avenue.
Yes, and just this late morning, we finished this up with Phil, and it will just be for the use. And it's an area similar to what we've dealt with before, where we have the road stopped and was never built. We have an extension of the right-of-way, and there are some lots down there, and this is in the old part of town. So this dates back to the early 1900s. So we have to allow people to have access to those. In the past, that's been done a variety of ways, and sometimes, frankly, just hasn't been addressed at all, and people just put the driveways in. So we're trying to document, in this instance, that these folks have permission to use the right-of-way to install their driveway, but at the same time, have an agreement that indicates that they will indemnify the town during that use. And this will be non-exclusive, because there are other properties that abut that. Just as this comes up, these folks want to buy this property and build a house, so this is our opportunity to formalize the agreement and allow them to put a driveway in there and establish they'll have to maintain any improvements they put in and the town doesn't, and all of the things that we've had to address after the fact on some of these others.
Council didn't see this until just now.
No, and I apologize. Like I said, Phil came by this morning, we had an additional discussion on it, and I made some changes and sent it back to him this morning, and then he ultimately finished it up and returned it. And we do have the agreement pretty much drafted as well, and Phil will approve that for form and content before it's utilized.
Any reason that is this a change of use at all? So should this potentially go before the Planning Commission?
I don't think so. But we're not, in fact, we specifically, and that's one of the things that I added, is that we're retaining all rights and privileges to that right-of-way. We're just allowing them to use it. So we're not relinquishing any right or privilege to it.
Since other, well, I just want to be careful and talk all this stuff so we don't make a mistake, potentially just in process. So I suspect that, we'll do this. But it is property that abuts other property owners' property that we're we're granting something on, should we, if we waited until the regular council meeting and this was posted, it would let other people have a chance to see it, since we didn't get a chance to see it. Is that potentially necessary or useful?
Here, Dan, here's the map of it.
It's just a right
I'd
of
like to
way.
see it too.
I don't
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't seem
think
complicated.
it's
I was
really
just
that
curious
kind
with
of an
it.
issue.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And again, the other, one property that abuts it is already using it as a
Are they
driveway.
building here?
There's another vacant lot, and if someone were to want to build on that lot, we would grant the same permission.
So 61.2 is that house that's been, is that place that's been empty for a long time? Are you familiar? And 614 is being remodeled back there right now.
Gotcha.
And so this is for 620, it's the one that's at the end. And
And
the
the-
problem that we ran into before, Susanna, had to do with something very similar on Carolina, where a developer built something and did some minor improvements to the road, but didn't bring it up to town specs. Just to bring you, because you're going to be on planning commission too, to bring you up to speed on this. If somebody puts in a road in a subdivision and they bring it to specs, to town specs, we then take it over. We don't have to, I guess, unless we
There's
approve it on the
general,
front
yeah,
end.
They would build it to our street criteria, and they would maintain it for a period of 2 years, warranty it during that period, and then, and we would inspect it while it's being built. And then after that period, then the town would accept it, the dedication, and it would become a town street, and we would maintain it thereafter.
Which creates a liability for the town, in a sense. And if we- yeah.
These are, yeah, driveway access is all that's being granted here.
I think it's pretty straightforward. I'll make a motion to approve it.
Let me read the header on it, and then we'll entertain motions. Is that okay? So it's a resolution authorizing Robert Fishman and/or any property owner of 620 Georgia Avenue to use the unopened right-of-way located adjacent to 620 Georgia Avenue for the purpose of installing and maintaining driveway access as shown on the map attached hereto and made a part hereof by reference, subject to certain conditions.
So,
Motion.
motion to approve.
Second?
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
4 in favor, no opposed. And I'll sign these and give them to you after the meeting's done. All right, moving on to discussion. Town attorney process. So we had our interviews a week ago, Thursday? Wednesday?
Wednesday.
We could go Wednesday, and we have, I mean, I'm speaking only for myself, but we have 3 really good candidates, which is fortunate. And now we have to choose one of the 3, and it's up to us as to how we do it. There are some, Boyd will chime in on this, what we don't know and didn't discuss specifically is pay. So if one of them costs us $1 million a year, that might eliminate them. But we have to determine, what the next step is on how we're going to vote, and if staff needs to approach them to help solve some of the problems between now and then. So I think we're talking about method and timeline.
And my thought and recommendation would be that, and I would have already done it, except that I wasn't certain of council's position on remaining process, if there was anything else you wanted to do. If not, then between now and the regular meeting, with time to get them to you in advance of that meeting, I would recommend that we request actual proposal for pay structure and rates from each of them, and I'll get those to you ahead of the meeting, and then you'll have that for consideration. And again, unless there's something else you guys want to do, if we can, then
I have a question. It seems It seems like since we are the client and basically the employer, that we would tell them, this is how much we'll pay you, this is how we'll structure it, if you want the job, it's yours. And that may make the decision easy. But if we have all these different pay scales, why don't we determine what we're willing to pay, or what we're paying right now? Just a thought.
From the discussion we had, one of the questions during the interview and pay structure that they would recommend, and frankly, looking at other towns and how they do it now, ours current is pretty unique.
Okay.
In that it is just a fixed amount, and unless you go over so many hours, that is what it is. Most are more kind of a hybrid, where you have a retainer for certain functions or a certain number of hours, and anything over and above that is, and that retainer covers a much smaller block of work than how we have it. So,
But we haven't to date paid any more than our retainer.
no.
Since we've had Phil. So what I want to avoid is getting in a situation where we have a new town attorney, that we are now exhausting our retainer and paying more.
Right. We could also end up on the other side.
If we're
of that.
able to do
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it could work the opposite direction as well. And that may be, I think this is where Bo's going. The different attorneys have it. That was the one thing they were all a little bit different on when he asked the open question about that. And so that might help us in deciding the way they work, if it fits the way we want to work, and what it's going to cost us going forward. And I think at some point, we probably need to talk about what actual qualitative information about that, but probably without Dr. Spalding here, we'd maybe hold off on that for now.
I agree.
So would we get a side-by-side comparison for the next meeting, just so we can kind of
Yeah.
see it?
Do we know,
I think that
is
makes
everyone going to
sense.
be here for the next meeting?
When is it?
It's the
10?
10th, sounds
I'll be
good.
here.
I'm here.
7th?
Seventh. Thank you.
It's the 6th.
We got
We're all over the,
on
It's the
Do I hear
No,
12?
it's not the 6th.
we have a tentative schedule for the 7th, it says on the,
yeah, that's what I saw in the,
Did we move it to that?
but you're right, it should be the
be the
14th.
14th.
I've got it on my calendar as the 14th.
That's
I
what
have it
I've
on
got
my
too,
calendar
yeah.
as the 14th.
Should it be the
Okay.
14th?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Is everybody going to be here the 14th,
Yes.
as far as we know?
I'm here.
School will be in session.
Is it possible if Boyd gets the information, sends the information to council about the different potential pay structures, that we could vote on the 14th? Is there a reason why we couldn't? You see any?
I will look at, see what is,
It's actually fortunate that the 14th gives them a little bit of time to respond. It also gives us time to follow up if we want to have questions based on what, follow up individually now.
and I don't think this is anything that's going to take them more than, I mean, literally, they could probably sit down and do this in an hour,
They do that every day. the
Yeah,
quote fees.
so, if I get something out to them on Monday, and have it by the following Friday, or even that next Monday, the 7th, that'll give you guys plenty of time to review it, and then contact anybody that you feel you need to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that timeline is reasonable.
Okay.
Anybody have anything else on that?
So the process basically comes down to the interviews that we had here, and then looking at the pay structure side by side. And is there any other personnel interviews that are conducted within the staff here, like with Sam or with you, or is that part of the process, or does that? So we just kind of evaluate
I
everything?
was privy to the, except for
Yes.
your individual
Yes.
discussions. The town attorney serves, you guys
Right.
hire them, and they serve at the pleasure of the council,
Yeah.
so.
I'll just
Unless we want
clarify.
another interview. I
Yeah.
think that's the process. That's my understanding.
So one of the candidates had a scheduling conflict with Planning Commission and BZA. Had you had any conversation with those
I talked to the chair of Planning Commission, which, since it is the one that meets most regularly, they were open to changing that schedule, but it would require that to accommodate his schedule.
Right, and we've also talked about the potential of making our work session be an evening meeting, and maybe doing the 2 Mondays as well.
Which
So
would create another conflict, I think,
that could create a
Might, yeah.
conflict, yeah. So,
potential for it.
but we can be prepared to talk about that, and there's nothing that says we have to vote on it on the 14th. If we hit a stumbling block, then we could table it to the next meeting then, or do something special if we had to, but,
I would imagine the sooner we make the decision, the better it'll be for Phil.
Absolutely.
yeah.
have a
And we
duty
don't
to
have an
him,
attorney
too.
here today, and
Yeah.
it would have been nice to have an attorney on the right-of-way thing that we had just a moment ago. I mean, it's those kinds of things where I wish there was an attorney here. 'Cause,
So are Phil's services with us complete?
Nope, he's still our attorney.
So he's still our attorney
Yeah,
until we have a
until
new
we have
one?
another one,
Okay.
All right, you guys, can we move on?
Yep.
Water rate study criteria. When I saw the packet that you sent, I wasn't sure if you were going to do the slide presentation again or not.
No, I just, in anticipating this discussion, really was just kind of looking for a way to get a starting point. And I don't know how in-depth council wants to get today,
Can,
but
to open to other people's opinion, because this is all just discussion, but it seems like what we need to do today, as opposed to chasing any big trails about, where we're going to end up once we get the data, this is about being, in my opinion, being able to assist staff in providing the information that's needed for MTAS and to be able to complete the study. Anybody see that differently? Do you see that?
that's exactly what we need.
So if we can stick to that, because there's so many tangents on this thing, but that's what we need to accomplish now.
So, again, looking for a starting point, I asked Sherry to put this presentation in the packet, just so we'll have it to refer to. And this was something I was asked to do several months ago. And since then, we got the MTAS report back, and they align pretty well. I was pleased with that, yep, these are the things that we need to do. So in looking at that and trying to get additional information, one of the things that they ask for is a 3 to 5 year capital projects plan. We have 2 documents to pull from in that regard. One was an Arcadis study that was done, an engineered study for our system, and the other is the town's 21-year plan. They don't mesh up exactly. We've done some of the things on the 21-year plan, and we've gotten some of the things on the Arcadis study done. So I looked at the Arcadis study again and just pulled from that what their recommendations are. And as we covered in the presentation, the things they recommend focusing on are the PVC lines in Hidden Brook and Carriage Hill. Those are huge projects.
The Arcadis, when in your presentation, you presented those as immediate. In the Arcadis study, they're several years down the road. They don't show those as being done immediately. I'm just a little, I've wondered about that for a while.
That, you recall that study was done in 2011.
Right, but it also has a date for them to be done, and I think one of them's like 2022, and they have specific dates on them, and they don't show them as yet. I'm not saying they don't need to be done.
Right.
saying they don't have to be
These are the
done.
things that they said we should focus on.
That
so-
MTAS said we should focus on.
Pardon?
You're saying that MTAS said we should focus on.
that Arcadis.
that Arcadis did, and then we put it on a plan.
I don't think the plan, the 21-year plan, gave any consideration to the Arcadis report, frankly.
That's the first time I've heard, I mean, not disputing that, it's the first time I've heard that, though.
That's all I did not play a role in
You were not involved.
devising that plan, but with discussions I've had, I don't think the Arcadis study was used to formulate that plan. And that's why I tend to lean towards the engineered study that's identified projects that we need to undertake.
But did the engineered study have a timeline?
I don't think so.
Who,
It said, I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
don't know, this is all like kind of
I
new
know.
to me,
And that's
so-
why I tried to put as much in.
Yeah, so, so the Arcadis plan was, is that the one that was conducted by engineers?
Mhm.
Okay, and how long ago was that done?
2011.
And then the 21-year plan was conducted,
That was put together by the director of the water department.
Along-
okay,
With who? Was this by himself or with, was
It's-
Hannah involved in that at the
I
time?
think she was involved in getting him to do it. I can't speak to how much involvement she had in it.
and
Okay.
do you know offhand when that was?
That was done initially, I believe around 2014. Again, that was,
And which was the one?
no, it
which
would have
was-
been prior to that.
Okay, so which plan was it that talked about these big projects that needed to be done to change the PVC to?
That's the Arcadis.
That's the Arcadis study, and that's the one that said you need to have, they sort of made recommendations about what needed to be done when, and that's what's in this PowerPoint that we're looking at here, that information. is
Yes, they
included.
didn't give specific timelines, but they said that the,
Okay,
you can find the exact wording. It is recommended that areas experiencing chronic system breakage be replaced with ductile iron piping and with proper bedding and installation techniques based on demand. They identify those. There are fire flow issues that we had that they prioritized. Most all of those have been done. Those were this last group of projects we did. 3 of the 4 were fire flow improvement projects. So we are working on the recommendations from Arcadis. These things are in the 21-year plan, but most of them are further back. The Arcadis study recommends that these are priority items.
So, but where we place them speaks to what water rates need to be, you know, when we're going to do them, how much money has to build up in the fund before we can do them, and
Well-
that kind of thing.
Yes and no.
Okay?
In reality, the rates wouldn't have anything to do with exactly where we put a piece of pipe.
No,
It's about the money we're going to need to do the project.
that's what I was saying. I wasn't talking about the piece of pipe. I'm saying where they fall in the timeline. So if you, and you haven't said this directly, but if you don't trust the integrity of the timeline that exists now, is that the first thing that needs to be addressed?
Yes. And have in discussing my assessment of where we need to start, and met with William and said, here's your plan, here's the Arcadis, they don't match up, here's what I think, are you good with that? Actually tweaked it some to incorporate one additional fire flow project that we still need to do, because that's a public safety concern. So worked with him, and he's good with this approach.
We
Now,
yeah.
again-
I get that, but we are the water board, and we haven't been involved in that, and this is where the water hits the pipe, I guess, and
And that's,
what we're doing now.
yeah. That's what I'm trying to convey that information to you. Now, if, as you'll see, if the details of the projects change, it's not going to affect the rates. The point of most of this is we just did a set of projects that was over $800,000. If we look at the Arcadis recommendation, we're going to easily get into the $600,000 to $700,000 range every year. No problem. If you look at the 21-year plan moving out, that trend can continue steadily. Now, the proposers indicated a lower level of investment in the system, but if you look at the engineered study or you look at the 21-year plan, either one, there's a need for a higher level of investment.
Right, and I'm not
But-
doubting that. My question just have to do with, is this a situation where it's possible for us, as a water board, all of us, to determine this is how much money we can spend each year? And this is how much money we want to have available to spend each year for improvements? And then after the fact, say, here's where those improvements are going to fall now and build
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. What I'm trying to give you is something that would substantiate what that number is,
Right.
instead of just saying, okay, we'll commit to 500,000.
But that number can look different if everything happens all at once, as opposed to, we're going to spread this out. That's all I'm questioning is.
And
how
that's, let me get a couple more steps down the road and see if that helps.
Okay.
Okay? So we looked at the 21-year plan, looked at the Arcadis plan, they're different. Again, my leaning is, we have an engineered plan, recommendations, this is where we focus, met with William, incorporated another project that we really need to get done, and came up with where we are. Also in their recommendation, Arcadis says the replacement projects in the Hidden Brook and Carriage Hill area could be completed in phases. If so, it is recommended to complete one street at a time with full replacement with ductile iron pipe water lines. So they're saying you can phase it, but if you do that, do a full section at a time, do a road at a time. So don't break it into really small pieces. So that's what I looked at to get this outline. Pass those down. And when we look at it that way, that's where we get to that figure. You'll pass one on around to Carol, please. And again, we're just looking to be able to provide MTAS guidance so they can set the rates. And if this is not the level of commitment that the council's comfortable with, that's fine. We had to have a starting point for this discussion.
So there's a page in the presentation, current bond financing.
Mm-hmm.
That has nothing to do with water, though, does it?
No, that was just an illustration of a couple different approaches to these large projects. This is what Arcadis says we need to get done. We can do it incrementally over a period of time, or we could fund it all at once with a loan. We had some loan data to use. Now, with a water utility, there are other funding mechanisms. That was just an illustration of what kind of difference that would make if you're going to fund it and then finance it over many years.
And there are also some grant funds available through the American Water Works
Mm-hmm.
Association that might help us with the project.
Right, absolutely. And that's, the difficulty with that is the uncertainty of being able to secure those or not. Having never pursued it, I'm not sure how competitive those are or how likely it would be, but there are other funding mechanisms that we could look at. Again, we just used what we had for illustration, or I did for illustration, saying it could cost this much over a period of time, or we could fund it and amortize it over 20 years, and that would have a lesser impact on the rates.
And
That's all that was.
that's that generational equity argument as well,
Right?
when you do it that way. There-
And
Yeah, you guys familiar with that term? Because I wasn't before this started, in that sometimes, even though you think, well, if you can pay for it over time, why have a loan? But one of the reasons to get a loan is because that spreads the cost of something out over the multiple users over time, as opposed to everybody who's paying for water right now, paying for the cost right now, or paying for the improvements right now. And in municipal situations, sometimes that's the smarter thing, even. It's very much how, at least from what I'm reading, that people look at budgeting and say, well, you should run it like you do your home budget. Well, actually, no, you shouldn't. That's not, because municipal budgeting is different.
So, and again, this is meant just to illustrate, if you look at what the study says and how they say to approach it, we get to some big numbers really quickly. And that's why it's a matter of one of the things I wanted to discuss on the front end. You know, if we do the meters and all that, and we finish the interconnect with WRUD in the first year, get the engineering done for the second year, and then start the Hidden Brook improvements and do the fire flow, get the engineering done for the third year. All of these figures are going to track fairly closely somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000. And the question then, obviously, is, are we willing to commit to that level? And if not, what level, and how do we break this up further to spread it out over time?
What's the amount that we're adding right now to the water fund?
That we're adding?
On an annual basis, our capital improvement, our water fund balance goes up by how much if no
Well, this
improvements are-
past year fund balance actually decreased. We
Well-
made,
improvements and things that have to be done separate from operating expenses, the cost of water. I mean, just,
Right.
do we know that number? Is it going up by $200,000 a year if we didn't do any improvements? Is it going up by 400 right now?
just operational costs.
Yeah.
I think it's minimal
Well,
increase.
it's been building. I mean, we had the money to pay for the, nearly $1 million that had to be done for the
Right.
fire hydrants.
I think you're asking two different things. If you're asking operational costs are staying relatively stable, they obviously go up like everything else does, but it's not a tremendous increase because the operation has remained relatively consistent. If you're asking about the fund balance, then that has grown over the last several years, but we just spent a big chunk of that.
So, but that's what I'm asking, and there's probably an accounting term that I don't know what it is.
And that information will be provided to MTS as well, and they'll look at those trends.
I'm just asking for us and being able to discuss it amongst ourselves and among citizens. If we stayed where we are right now, how far short would we fall of having the $600,000 to $800,000 a year? When would we run out of money?
Very quickly.
How
I mean,
can,
I can't tell you, no, I can't, without it in front of me, I can't answer exactly, but we can't sustain that level of investment at all.
right, so,
And that's why that fund has grown consistently over the years, because we haven't been making those larger investments.
we haven't been doing
And if
investments.
I might, and if we go 2 years in a row decreasing the fund balance in the water fund, the state will step in and require us to make some sort of an adjustment to the water rate so that that doesn't happen in year 3.
So and as we've discussed, in looking at the potentials, really we're trying to hit a point so that if we did sell the system, we hadn't amassed additional funds during this last 3-year period. We didn't build up funds so we could take it and use it for something else. But not to drop that fund level down to the point that we are endangered, and we're not. And speaking with the finance consultant with MTAS that was part of that study, he basically said, you guys hit the nail on the head. You're right there where you want to be. If you keep the system and move forward, you need to try to maintain that level of fund balance and then set everything going forward. But we're at that point where if we continue to operate the way we have in the past, there will be a slow increase to that fund balance. But
we
I
can't
think
do
the
that.
commitment is that we're not going to do that.
But we're not going to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
So moving forward, I think we need to look at rates that will sustain, and we have a fund balance now that will allow us to move forward with capital projects as rates replenish that. So we have funds to finance projects, and then the rates set to replenish those funds for the upcoming projects. So we're in a pretty good position to move forward. They just need to know what it is we plan to do in the future.
So this answers, looking at their list of questions. Capital project schedule, basically.
Right.
So this covers number 4.
Or
off of
number
that
4.
list. I'm comfortable with this. Anybody
Well, I
else ready to
am
move
as
on
well.
to some other portions of this?
The only question I have about that plant, Bo, is the interconnect with WRUD. Is that going to be enough to allow us to purchase water from them? if
Well,
we chose to
that's
do so?
why there are a couple X's there instead of a dollar amount. That really has to be determined. There's a range there. If we finish the interconnect as it was designed and we agreed, the cost is going to be minimal. If we want to complete that so that in the future that could be a supply, it's going to be significantly more. So that's another decision that has to be made before that can really be plugged in.
And nobody likes this, but we're probably going to have a meeting just to talk about this stuff. I mean, I feel like we ought to have a water board meeting. Where, because
Technically, you are.
technically we are, right, but
And again, my goal here is to get a starting point for making these decisions. I mean, I honestly
Yeah.
think, one of the things I've struggled with through this process is to make sure I don't come off as trying to make things look really bad.
right.
And I've heard that, and that is not the case at all.
Could it
This
be-
level of investment could be sustained for many years with legitimate, necessary projects to improve the system. And if we throttle that back some and spread it over a larger period of time, don't necessarily think that's wrong. But approaching this the way the engineers have suggested it, this is where we are.
And this looks especially good if we considered, long-term bond financing to get this done. And as Dan said, spread it over 20 years so that future ratepayers get to enjoy it as well.
On the front end, I think that is an attractive scenario, but if this level of investment continues to be necessary, then the additional bond amounts are going to basically amass to the point that you're in the same scenario, because you're covering, instead of covering the cost of a project, you're covering the cost of multiple debt service obligations. So ultimately, it may end up being fairly similar impact. It would just be a more gradual.
It might be year
Jump.
5 instead of year 2 or 3 before
Right.
you're feeling the real.
But I assume this is the type of bond where we would draw on it
Right.
as we needed it versus taking a lump sum.
most likely. I mean,
Right. If, I think if the arbitrage rules and all apply the same way, we could only get a bond for the projects that we could engineer complete in a 3-year period of time,
So-
and not hold the funds.
So that would be is it Ironwood, isn't that the company that does a lot of these major things? So if we hired Ironwood to do 5 years' worth of things, you would draw as you needed to pay them, but who knows if they have the personnel to tackle, 3 major projects at once.
Well, they had, the ones we did were 4 relatively small projects, but you combine them, and they were, for us especially, quite a project.
Right. There might be some economy of scale in doing that, and to bring
The only
them
way
on.
you're gonna get that, though, is if they do it all at once.
That's what I'm saying. It's, if you hire them to do these projects, it becomes up to their schedule as to how they schedule it, but you get what's the word you've used before, when you get them on site?
The
The
mobilization.
mobilization fee would be less. it
But
seems.
unless they do them all at once, each time they come back, you're gonna get another mobilization cost.
Is that a percentage of, like, what
It-
kind are you talking about?
It varies, but it can be. Basically, the cost of getting all their equipment, all the materials, everything on
The
site,
staging.
ready to go. So if they're gonna, like this, we did 4 projects all at once, we basically had 1 mobilization. But if you bid this out and there are 4 different projects, and you say, okay, we want you to do this over the next 4 years or 5 years, there's no advantage to them, because they're basically bidding 4 separate projects and gonna have to mobilize every time. That's why I'm saying,
But it
the
would-
advantage would be if they did do it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
That's where your savings would be.
But in the Arcadis report, where it mentioned, for instance, let's say we're talking about Middle Creek or Carriage Hill, and doing a street at a time, doing a block at a time, you could look at all the streets as a block. Wouldn't you save some mobilization money that way if you said?
If they did it all at once.
What about, like, materials procurement? If you buy more,
They could get bulk.
you might save
Rates
more
on
that
that.
way too.
Then you make a circle with, we don't have to do this all at once.
Yeah.
I know.
To like, maybe a good
Maybe we
idea to
should
do all
maybe
this.
we
so
should
that,
do it all.
you know,
The irony is not lost.
And that's exactly why I put
Yeah.
some of the stuff I did in that presentation, that there are different ways to approach these things, and there are advantages and disadvantages to them.
And this is only if we keep the system.
Right.
So if we were to sell the system, remind me, would they be doing this all at once or over a period of time?
That would be up to them. They proposed different levels of investment. Sam?
Over how many years?
1% of the system per year, which equated to about a month, with no giveback. We asked for the first 5 years and given $250,000 loan, about $600,000 the first year, $500,000 from the others.
And that's at no cost to us because we would be making money off the sale, right?
Yeah, we would have no investment in that process once the system,
Okay.
But we
Is it
also might be living with the consequences if there are issues and things that come up. We don't have a say as to when they would make the necessary improvements and repairs, and, so that's a risk too.
I think that's one of the rabbit trails that we probably shouldn't follow today,
Yes.
because we have to have this
Agreed.
information in order to make that decision. I
Yeah.
mean, But
Yeah.
we need this to get to that.
Absolutely.
If I'm just looking quickly down this MTS needs, many of these are already covered, and so
yes,
like our job.
we can provide a lot of this.
Yeah, one, the audit's done. You guys, Carol can do anything. Current year financial reports, that's Carol. Current budget for water and sewer, we've already given them that, right? Or that's easy.
We have
I mean,
those,
because
yeah.
we have the budget. the ordinances, all the ordinances establishing that, you guys give them all that. Really, it looks to me like we're only talking about this. There is the hiring component of it. Maybe that's what we should move on to now. But we don't have that yet. Can we move on to that? Are you guys ready? If we're comfortable with the capital needs plan? Or the capital investment plan?
Okay. All right. The other large question then is, pass one of those down to Carol, please. And I struggle sometimes on how to present this stuff, because a lot of times I worry about, if I just send you a bunch of stuff without some explanation of what I'm trying to convey, it may make matters worse. So if you would like a different approach, let me know. But some of this, I'd kind of like to give it to you and walk through it. Also in the presentation, we talked about staffing, and again, the MTAS study bore out that we do need additional staff. We looked at, if you look on the bottom section of this, comparable utility staffing, we most know at this point that is the staff of Walnut Ridge Utility District, as compared next to is our current staff. We're very similar in size, and you can see there's quite a difference in our staffing. I added some information to this. We try to avoid that, but all of this is public record. And I've added to this at the top. In the presentation, we talk about what our current market is for each of those positions. The next line over is our current actual. This is what we're paying the people in those positions. The next column is my initial estimate of where we probably needed to be competitive and get good people, and the good people that we have raise the bar and expect some additional training and expertise, and we should compensate them accordingly. There's a company, Burris Thompson, that does a pretty detailed wage study, and we've actually participated in that this year, and we'll be getting that to use for our salary survey. In doing that, I asked them to send me a copy of their most recent one. When they ask us to participate, and you'll get a copy of it, and I said, well, I need to see what I'm going to get a copy of. So they did send me their most current. So I went through that and looked at the job descriptions and matched them up as best I could with what our job descriptions are, and then looked at the pay scales that were associated with that. What you see on this, is broken up. They give you one chart that is all respondents. They give you another chart that are just those respondents under 30,000 population, and then one that's just over 30,000. And there are almost all of the participants are in Tennessee, and there are a lot that are under 30,000 and are, many of them very comparable to our size. So I think it is a really good scale to use. So when I did that and went back through and looked at what they have, and then lined out how it fell out, again, the initial estimate on the top three is a little higher than I thought, but all in all, it's pretty close to what I was thinking we might need to establish as a competitive rate. Then down on the bottom, you'll see again the other utility staffing, our current staffing, what I initially proposed, and then going back and looking at our structure and Walden's, and I tweaked that a little bit, and then you have the proposed staffing level. I would add that operating the utility, I think we will need to think about an additional clerk or position or something like that. And frankly, I think we need to look at a facility as well. What we have is functional as a shop. I don't think it very well represents a functional professional utility operation, that your office is in basically a plywood room in a metal building. So I think there are other things that we do need to consider,
Can I
and
ask-
just for the record, but
Right.
again, starting point.
But right now, you're only adding one laborer.
Right now, we're
The proposed
staffing.
staff versus current staff, you're talking about
Well-
adding one laborer.
Current staff versus proposed, we're adding operators and one laborer.
Oh, I see, you're switching,
Yeah.
okay, you're switching laborers. to
Basically, we're
operators.
saying that staff members, you really have to have that laborer position. I would hope that we ultimately are in a position where we don't have anyone that functions just as a laborer, that we have everyone who's passed their operator's test and gets that rate of pay. But this is what I think we should strive for, to have at least 3 to 4 that are certified operators, and then have that laborer position.
From a percentage-wise, the difference between what we're paying an operator and a laborer right now looks like it's only about, it's a little less than 10%, but what it's going, the Burris Thompson and the proposed is closer to 25% more. Is that about right? So,
For the upper,
yeah, for the upward pay
Right.
from a laborer, so it's statistically significantly different than what we're paying now, the difference between the two positions.
yes. And again, that is
Are qualifications different?
absolutely. I mean, an operator
I don't-
is a,
No, I don't mean between the two. Will the qualifications in the new system, should we keep it, be different than what they are now for operator versus laborer? Does the
Yes.
job description change significantly?
absolutely.
Okay. Not from operator to laborer, from operator to operator. In the new system, will the operator have different
We
qualifications?
don't have an operator job description right now.
But we show that we have an operator, skilled laborer, is that?
Well, the skilled laborer is what we have. Operator should be what it equates to. That skilled laborer does not have an operator certification, but they're working on that. So those are, when you look at the top left, those are just kind of what they should compare to ultimately. We have a director, next in command, skilled laborer. When it's all said and done, the things in parentheses ought to be kind of what it equates to in a new structure.
Yeah, we're adding a crew chief too, we didn't.
That's basically the lead man position now. You'll see those 3 positions, the top 3, even in our current, are a good bit above the other positions.
Does anybody have any, are you finished with basically presenting this?
I'm comfortable with what he's presented.
All right, let's move on.
One question, still related to water. You had provided a copy of the 10th extension of the water purchase agreement,
And that's,
and it appears it hasn't been signed as yet.
That's coming up, we're gonna do that.
yeah, I mean, that's really part of, and that's why I kind of included it with all of this. Something else that we need to consider is our long-term cost for purchasing water, and that directly relates to that, which we will need to execute before the end of next month.
For the first
So this seemed to be a good opportunity to introduce that and at least begin that discussion. And I don't know that we'll be in a position to project anything unless in some form we do a long-term extension with Tennessee American. Other than that, things are, kind of unpredictable.
So-
Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, it's just we won't know what our cost of purchasing water will be until we pursue some other avenue if we were to do that.
So before we drink from that fire hose, we've basically covered everything on the MTask, well, you, staff.
Well, yeah, I gave you a point to start. If that start is acceptable as a finish, that simplifies things, but if not,
Well,
I'm certainly willing to do some additional work on it.
when MTask comes back with a report, that's not a mandate.
Right.
That's a report that we take the information from that and choose what we're going to do next from. And so I think to give them what they want is a good start.
Yeah.
Then it gets us to
And
where
then they
we
may come back and say, we need additional.
Right, if we say that for the purpose of this study, and I think that's a very important point, because what you've done today hasn't approved or committed to any of this. You've said this is what you're comfortable with. And so this is close to where we'll end up if we keep the system, but it's not a definite, but we can tell MTAS this is where we think we need to be, and then they can set the rate accordingly. And once that's done, especially with changing the rate structure and all of that, once that's done, adjusting it for variables will be a lot easier.
Right.
And
So,
I maybe should know this, but I don't. How long is that MTS report going to take for them to compile once we submit all the required?
They should, right now, I'm still hoping they'll be able to hit like the end of February.
Okay.
So with that, again, another variable is if we anticipate any significant change in cost of purchasing water. And again, that provided the opportunity to introduce these documents. I have talked to Kevin Krasinski with Tennessee American, had an email from, I just went blank, Tennessee American about setting up a meeting to discuss this, and with holidays and everything, I haven't been able to do that. But in discussing it with Kevin, the new language here is, their concern is the interconnect. And if we do an interconnect, they have to protect the integrity of their system so that we couldn't be switching back and forth from water sources, and which is perfectly understandable. I don't know that this is the language that we'd ultimately be comfortable with, but that was the rationale behind introducing this language. And for some reason, they thought we were literally getting ready to make the connection, and that's why they sent it in November, even though our current agreement doesn't expire until the end of January. So this is something we need to deal with, but we have a meeting and a work session before our current expires.
I'm not at all comfortable doing a 3-year exclusive deal. If it were 12 months and renewed every year thereafter, that would be comfortable. At least we'd have an option. But to say that Tennessee American should have the absolute right to provide us our water for 3 years just doesn't sit real well with me.
I agree with that.
I suspect have you talked to Boyd about this?
No.
So I wish I had a recording of the conversation, because I had the same phone call with Boyd about this, and it seems poorly worded at best. But it does have, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody can break it in a year. It's built in. You can break this in a year, so it's 3-year, but you can break it with a year's notice. But the way it's worded, it looks like if we, and this again isn't the trail we're going to follow, but if we chose to sell our water company to Walden's Ridge Utility District, this, at least the way it's worded, makes it look like they would be obligated to buy their water from Tennessee American. And that needs to be worded differently, I think, before I'm comfortable with this contract, at least that part. The 1-year ability to break the contract, I don't think is anything new, because we've done 3-year contracts with them forever. Is that right?
Yeah, they've varied. We've had shorter terms recently because of the,
Those have just been extensions though, right?
well, that's what this is.
What's a 3-year extension?
This original contract goes back many years, and these have just been, this is the 10th extension to that contract. So the base contract has been in position for, I think,
Since
12?
97?
Well, the original one was from, right.
369.
The new rate, yeah, you're right.
So we can propose, I mean, it's a contract that, we're the water board and we're meeting about it right now. We can propose different wording for it. Has Phil weighed in on this?
Not yet. And that was one of the things that I would suggest is to draft, and again, did not anticipate in-depth discussion about this. It was just, again, an opportunity to get it to you guys. And I will get Phil to propose some alternate language, and ultimately may get with you guys individually and get your take on it ahead of our other meetings.
So we're
But-
going to wait on this?
I'm
Because
comfortable
we
with
have
that.
till the end
You
of
guys?
January. All right.
Anything you think we missed on that we should have been talking about right now, Boyd?
I don't think so, other than, and again, a big part of having those in there, that any major anticipated increases or decreases in revenue or expenses, that would be one that would fall in that category, but and unless council prefers otherwise, I'm going to basically anticipate a steady cost of water moving forward. And then if you choose to change sources or whatever, again, once all this is in place, I think adjusting for that variable will be reasonably easy to do. So we'll, for the purpose of the study, we'll anticipate that we'll continue to buy water at the cost we have for the last several years, because it hasn't gone up, and then we'll
Yeah,
adjust necessary.
That's important to note on this extension. It doesn't have an increase in the base rate for water.
We'll still have the capital rider.
The rider is a different thing, but it doesn't have that, yeah. That was one of my first questions, too. All right, can we move on to the next item, which is RFP audit services? And the issue, as I perceive it, is it's been said you shouldn't keep the same company doing your audit, I've heard, but I've also heard saying it's really important that you keep the same company doing your audit. So I think that's the issue that's on the table, right?
Well,
As to whether or not we
partially,
RFP it.
partially. Prior council asked that we prepare for an RFP for audit services. So that's what we've done. And what you have is the guideline from the comptroller's office relative to that, and you have the draft RFP for audit services. And so we are prepared to do that, but since there is a change, just want to make sure that that is what council's pleasure is.
So my questioning, don't know if I've asked you this, Carol, but I think I've asked Boyd. They work well with the auditors they have now. That's a question, not a statement.
Can I say a couple of things?
Yeah, you're the one who's working with them.
In my opinion, we do work well with them, but they're very tough. And I think it is going to be very difficult to find somebody that has the qualifications and the staffing and the knowledge that they have at any other firm in this area. They do almost every community in Hamilton County. They do have quite a background of knowledge with us, so they understand our procedures, they know what to be looking for. They have caught us in a couple of things over the years. You know, you'll make a mistake and you'll lapse in something, and they're always right on it. We've never had anything that I felt uncomfortable that they weren't. They're very thorough. They come in twice a year. They come in real early after close and do a preliminary, and they have 4 or 5 staff people that come. They spend a couple of days. They go through everything, and then they go and they work it in their office. And then later on, when we're ready and we say our books are closed, they come back with 5 or 6 people. They spend, 3 or 4 days, as long as it takes, and they go through the final documents, and they assist us in closing final entries, those things that need to be done by the auditors. And I'm satisfied with them. I think they're very thorough, and I'm happy with them.
So this discussion, it's a different council. Did the past council instructed staff to draw up an RFP? This isn't, but not, it hasn't been something that's been voted on to send out the RFP.
I don't recall exactly that was the case, no.
So it's not, I want to get all that on the table, because if this council votes, which would just by consent here, we can vote by consent that we either want to have this come to the regular meeting or not. It's not a matter of tabling it at this point. It's a matter of whether or not.
No,
we
and
wanna
I
send this
don't
forward.
know that, it needs to come to, as much as anything, I anticipated kind of this discussion, do we really want to do this?
Right.
But as much as anything, we're requesting proposals for auditing services, and they're auditing us. I want you guys to look at the RFP and make sure that it's as inclusive and as thorough as you want it to be, as much as anything.
Considering Carol's points, considering our current auditor's experience with the town and with other municipalities, do we even need to get into that whole RFP thing?
I don't know. I mean, it is totally the council's discretion, and people may not believe it, but I like them because they are extremely tough. It's that simple. If I was
Yeah,
concerned.
why are we doing this?
If it's a matter of cost, if we're concerned about cost, then that's driving one thing. I just think it's important for me to go on record saying, I think the quality of service we get from them is outstanding because they are tough, and that's exactly what I want. If I make a mistake, I want somebody to find it so we can correct it. Again,
Yeah,
if
so
it's
we
a
have this
matter
on the
of
table
cost.
and 2 town employees that are saying they're happy with the services we have. So I
And their cost
think we
has
just,
always been reasonable.
I don't-
And
I mean,
according
we
to
were
the
on the
state,
previous council, and I
cost
don't
is
remember doing
the
that.
least of the
Do you?
issues that you should look at. So,
Well,
according to the state recommendations from the comptroller, the cost should be the least of the issues that you
Yeah,
look
I
at.
would-
It should
I would
carry
think
the
that,
least
yeah.
weight.
absolutely.
So
So,
let's move on, unless someone wants to make a motion
may
that we.
may I ask
Yes.
that you, because I guess since we were just asked to prepare it, we have done that.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and get it, just a voice vote that says we're going to table this idea for now. We're not tabling a prior motion. We're just saying that we're going to table this idea for now. And anyone, and the only My only hesitation is that Dr. Bob's not sitting here, because he might feel differently about this, that there would be someone making an argument. I'm not hearing anyone making the argument that this absolutely needs to be done, we need to move forward. Is that, everyone would be comfortable making that, but no one's making it. So even if Dr. Bob felt differently, it would still be 4-1
Right.
at this point. So somebody want to make a motion that we table this idea?
So move.
Second?
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 4-0. Ordinances pertaining, oh gosh, here we go. Ordinances pertaining to firearms, air guns, et cetera. I don't know how many of you have had a conversation with Boyd about this, but he has gotten geeky and studied this. I mean, to find out that it's not as simple as you would think. Now, this came up, this all comes down to goats. No, I know.
No, the firearms is coyote.
Get, right.
Yeah.
Coyote.
Which, like in Jurassic Park.
trickle
You
down.
know, it's a trickle down. Yeah, it's a thing. It all kind of goes around this thing. And
Blaming goats for everything.
Amy, is
they
your
pee on
mic
their
back on?
heads.
Yes. I think I'm having trouble, because I keep coughing, and I'm trying to turn it off when I cough, and I'm not turning it back on.
Oh.
I'm all discombobulated.
So,
Sorry.
what did you learn?
Well, at that meeting, one of the points that was made was that there were conflicting information given from two sources of authority. TWRA tells folks, shoot them. Coyotes, not goats. And our officers tell people, well, you can't do that because you can't discharge firearms in town. So after that discussion, and I don't remember who it was, but a council member said, well, we need to look in that. Can you do that? And that's what I do, so yeah. So I did look into it, and I sent you guys the memo that I sent to Phil, and then his response as well. And I'll try to put this in a nutshell. Basically, originally the state preempted most laws relative to firearms and said municipalities don't have the ability to control those things. There was an attorney general's opinion that said, well, they didn't exempt the whole field of firearms, and they didn't specifically say anything about discharge, so you can control that. And immediately thereafter, the state said, well, okay then, changed the law, and they preempted the entire field of firearms. And they didn't just say discharge, they said the use. So the state law controls everything about firearms, including use, sale, everything. In addition to that, the state law also says that the Tennessee Wildlife Commission has sole and exclusive authority over hunting. And you can't do anything that contradicts their regulations. The state of Tennessee also passed a constitutional amendment that says citizens of Tennessee have the constitutional right to hunt. So ultimately we get down to the state says it's legal to hunt, including coyotes, and that there are certain firearms that you can use to do that. And the state has preempted both of those areas so that I don't think we can control it.
So people can shoot coyotes, bottom line, right?
Now,
Kind of, yeah. But if
And
you,
it-
as Boyd said, if
Right.
you own the bullet,
right.
fire the gun, you
And
own the
one of the
bullet.
things that Phil provided, Chattanooga, there's an ordinance about shooting near a residence or creating a nuisance by noise. That goes back to 1986, which predates these preemptive laws and was prior to Attorney General's opinions. Basically, the AG opinion that speaks most directly to that says that if you discharge a firearm recklessly, then you can be charged with reckless endangerment or assault or aggravated assault. There are laws that you can be charged with separate and apart from a municipal ordinance. So if somebody shoots recklessly and shoots somebody, we'll charge them with aggravated assault or reckless endangerment.
Reckless endangerment, you don't even have to shoot somebody. Reckless endangerment would preempt the
Be a
TWRA
threat.
rules.
Right. That is another state law.
Okay.
And the same with property damage. If you damage somebody's property, then there are civil laws that
Right.
allow that person to take action and recoup their damages. And it's, the important thing I think to understand is that we're really not changing anything. I'm really surprised it hasn't been challenged before. But it's not like we are taking action to allow something.
Right.
We're coming to a realization that we don't have the authority to restrict it.
But doesn't it say here, the town may prohibit hunting on lands owned by the town? So
That-
they can
that we
only
can.
discharge the firearm in a hunting sense from their private property.
On private property, whether
Or-
it's theirs or if they have permission from somebody.
Or if they're threatened.
Right. But at
Endangered,
that point,
yeah.
they're not really hunting, they're protecting themselves. But yes, none of this preempts private property rights or public property rights. So we have the right to say you can't hunt in Rainbow Lake or any other town property. But that's where our authority stops, because that's where our property stops. And a property owner or someone who has permission from the property owner, I can't find anything that says we have the authority to intercede, and including noise ordinance.
But it's possible that we have a conflict with concealed carry and,
No, the signage, there's a valid point about signage in some of our parks. Some of it had been removed, but there were some that the old signage was still up, and we've resolved that.
okay.
There has been a change in the law, and it is very limited in how we can, concealed carry is different than being able to hunt. This building, fire and police buildings, and the library, I believe, are the only places that we can prohibit firearms. All of our other town facilities, we don't have the ability to, our town parks, unless there's a school function at that particular place at that particular time, then they're not allowed to. But at this point, our ability to limit carrying of firearms is minimal. And this is really kind of a different thing. That came up in conjunction with that discussion, and they were correct that there were some out-of-date signage up, and we realized that, and that's been removed. And we're working on getting more current signage, and especially for here. Because court is held here, this building is exempted, whether court's in session or not. So we will be posting the entrance to this.
So this is just informational, are we doing any action?
Well, it's
on this?
informational, but we will need to change our ordinance.
Our ordinance, right.
Because right now, our ordinance says you can't do this, and state law says,
Yes, you can.
yeah, you can.
It sounds like we need to delete section 11503, which currently says it's unlawful to discharge a firearm.
Right.
And perhaps replace it with something that says it's unlawful to hunt on town property.
What was that number again?
11503?
And,
Yeah.
you know, as opposed to removing it, maybe we incorporate that, you know, because it does kind of address the other provisions of law if we say that it's unlawful to discharge a firearm in the town of Signal Mountain except in accordance with state law. Then that kind of covers us there, and then we could continue maybe with a subsection that goes into a little more detail on town property.
We should probably direct Phil to
Okay.
do the language
Can
on
I
that.
make a suggestion that we I'm keeping a list now of all these different things that we hold this until we get a new attorney. And then we'll bring it back up and give this to the new attorney to work on.
And I can, unless something changes, generally, the approach for the last 4 years anyways, I would draft this ordinance
Right.
and provide it to the attorney for review, so I can be doing that. And then when the new attorney comes in, get it to them for review, so we're not kind of dead in the water, but
Well,
I'll
Phil's
work on
already
it. you know.
done some work on it. I don't know why we would wait and just have Phil do it. He's provided all this information already, and we're still paying him, so why wouldn't we just have him do it?
I'll work on the draft and see how long
I mean,
that
I'm in no
takes,
hurry,
and-
I'm just saying, like, we're paying him, so,
Yeah, no,
and he's done the preliminary work. It's not anything complicated or controversial.
Sure, that works. Anybody else? Thank you for that clarification. SMMHS High School traffic.
Yay.
You want me to, at the last couple meetings, actually, we discussed this, and the idea of a committee was brought up. Since then, I've talked with Amy. She had the joy of joining me at a WWTA meeting, so we took that opportunity to discuss this a little bit as well.
You're welcome, by the way, because you were next to go.
What I would like to propose is that, and I've never expressed a concern like this, so I'm not necessarily comfortable with it, but I just don't know that this is a good fit for a true citizens committee. I think this is going to be an intergovernmental scenario that we're going to have to work with the county, we're going to have to work with the state. I'd like to be able to form a staff committee with myself, Sam, Loretta, maybe Chief Williams, and try to find a person from out of the school that has intimate knowledge of the issues and is concerned to work with us on that, but primarily have a staff committee, and Amy said she would like to work on that as well, and start with looking at all the options that we've looked at. And because a lot of folks just don't know what we've considered, and the frustrating part for us, as we've discussed, is that none of the land around there is ours.
Right.
So we can't do anything.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we haven't looked at a lot of these options, and at least start with, okay, here are the different options, and here are the ups and downs that we've identified, and bring that back and at least start the discussion there and determine if I think Susanna may have suggested the possibility of a traffic study or an engineer to look at it and provide guidance on what would best accomplish what we're looking at. And frankly, that's another thing that we do kind of have to nail down is what are we looking at? If it's primarily a convenience, and I don't mean this to sound,
Safety.
if it's
Not
convenience, that's probably one approach. If we're really looking at how to provide emergency access anytime we need it, that may be a different approach.
Can we do both, though, Boyd? Because I think, you have a traffic problem, and the traffic problem is what causes the safety problem.
Right.
There's too many cars going into one little funnel area.
Yeah, I don't think,
There's an
one's
accident,
not
we're all-
exclusive, one's not
Yeah.
exclusive of the other, but we have to look at it that way and say, what will this approach accomplish? And granted, if you improve the traffic flow, you improve the delay of emergency response, but how much may be the question. And there may be another approach that provides far better emergency access that maybe doesn't help the general traffic flow as much. So I think those are the things we kind of nailed down on the front end of what some of the most viable options seem to be and the pros and cons, and then try to get the county and the state to the table and see what we can do.
Could we put, and this could be changed, but could we put a deadline for a report?
Sure.
So that the staff committee if we choose to do it this way, comes back with a report that could then be made public so that people could see
Yes.
everything that's being talked about.
No, I agree with that 100%.
And these are the steps that we're taking to address
Right.
what the issues are.
And these are the possibilities.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with the deadline, and I actually like, after we talked, my only goal, however we get there, we can come to collectively. So if this is going to be the way that's going to accomplish the goal, which is safety, and there is a convenience factor, because we've got to think long-term. We've got a subdivision on Shackelford Ridge slated for 199 homes. The convenience factor is going to be a problem, not just for people going to school, but for everybody going to work. So we've got to think 5, 10 years down the road, the solution. And obviously, safety is my number one concern. That's why I brought it up, and that's why I'm kind of beating the drum on it. But we've also got to think, what is our community going to look like in 5 and 10 years with all the development that's going on? And we're going to have to address it. So I want to, those are my 2 goals, safety first, and there is a convenience factor.
Sure.
Would it be possible to schedule for the February meeting, not necessarily the report, but for the February meeting, a preliminary report, basically, so that at that meeting, you would probably be the one to make this, say, this is what we're discovering,
Yeah.
this is where it looks like, not that we're done, but this is what's happening, just so that we can
Because
have
who,
some
Is that enough
if we were gonna
time? 'Cause
consult
you're dealing
with-
with county.
No, you
and-
wouldn't
if
be
we're
done.
talking about bringing in experts to
No.
look at, to study this, like who,
Yeah, no, my
Who
my
would-
point isn't to be done in February.
yeah, no, I
But to, by
know.
then, to say, this is what it's going to take to accomplish a report, and this is where we are, and just to keep everyone.
That's probably a
abreast.
question for Boyd. Is
Yeah,
that
I mean, I
doable?
think certainly in February, we would be in a position to come in and say, this is what we're working towards accomplishing, and this is where we are in the process.
And, yeah, and this is how we intend to do it.
That's,
Can we just go ahead
no
and do
matter
that?
where we are in the process, then that's a
That's where
reasonable,
we are, yeah.
Yeah.
We want an update by then. And are we all agreeable to a staff committee?
Yes, I think that's,
I think that's great. And maybe
I think
Dr.
that's great,
Harwood would be
too.
great to get, I mean, he's,
I mean, I would like to hear from the police officers who are out there in the morning directing traffic now. Like, how do they think it's going? You know, what is their take on it? Do they have an opinion about
right,
how
and the
things are
chief would
going?
be on
And
it, you said.
and all of that, but also, so in terms of just like a traffic study, because that's, you know, Shackelford Ridge Road, like who do you work with from the
They're-
state? Is
they're-
it TDOT? Is it Hamilton County? Is it,
well, it depends on what we can, you
all
know,
of them.
the county,
it's
the
all of
county
them.
probably has traffic engineers on staff.
yes?
Maybe we could.
I mean,
get
I would,
them
because
to-
I would like to hear, I'm sort of with Amy in terms of the safety aspect, and I'm just surprised that when all the planning for putting the school in the first place was going along, why couldn't somebody have seen that this was gonna, the way that they cut the road into the school was gonna be, that access was ultimately gonna be an issue if you're building a school for 1,500 students, and you've got one point of entry, and you've got to get by another school to get to it. Like, it's just,
I think it was so contentious
But I
back
think that we
then
have the
nobody thought they'd
grounds.
go to the school.
Well-
Nobody
I just
thought
think
the
we
school was
have
gonna be what it is.
From what I-
a very good argument to go to whoever we need to and get their attention and say, this is like a hot priority. This is not something that needs to be put, you know, on a back burner. This is something that we really want to address. We'd like to get it done in expediently a manner as possible.
And I think originally there actually was in the design a second entrance, but again, there was quite a bit of contention and not just on citizen level, but on the governmental level as well, and I don't have anything to do with the town.
Yeah,
But
no,
again,
no.
you've
But-
got
but
state
that's why I want
property,
to think
you've got.
long-term. What I don't want to do is a short-term fix because people are crying about safety, and I'm one of them, I'm not knocking that, but we need to think where, this high school is getting close to capacity, we're going to have to add on, there are more and more people moving to the mountain, we're not going to stop it, but we need to make sure whatever solution we come up with, that in 10 years or in 5 years, the next council is not going to be like, oh, we have another traffic problem, now nobody can get out of their neighborhood. Like, we've got to think long-term.
More methodically.
Thank you for putting that on there.
Bo, do you think you, and the committee might be able to even map the couple of potential routes into the school?
Yeah, I
as
mean,
you
we,
look at it?
Yeah, some of them
We've-
exist.
yeah, I mean, I've done that. And a lot of people don't, I've had discussions with county representatives. And so it's not something that hasn't been getting attention. It's just, we have very little clout when it comes to a higher level of government and their property. And we've got to get them at the table and on the same page with us.
Chip could maybe be a good advocate for us in this.
But, yes,
All should be advocates, because it's going to take something terrible that's going to happen to get their attention. Everyone should be advocating this. You cannot get in there if something
Well,
happens.
I think, I can, it was such a monumental task and project, and there were, a lot of moving parts a decade ago when the school was going in. Now we've been living with this traffic situation / snarl for 10 years. So we've got really a more demonstrated need. So maybe we could support it with,
Well,
any
there
kind of
was an
evidence that we
accident
might
right
have.
before-
Any kind of accidents or things like that that have come up in the past. Maybe we can,
I don't know, the
use
chief's
that.
not here. I'm curious how long it took them to get to that accident. There was a potentially terrible accident that happened right before break. It was when we were on a 2-hour delay. It was ice. And I don't know how long it took. Thank goodness she was okay. I knew the girl.
oh, yeah.
But, what if she wasn't? What if there was entrapment? How do we get to her? I'm going to still be vocal about this one, guys. I'm passionate about this. But I appreciate you putting that on the agenda, and you, Boyd, for taking the lead on a committee. So thank you. And you, Susan.
Excellent. All right,
I agree.
work session schedule.
if you don't mind, before we move forward, 'cause it kind of got separated, we addressed the 2 resolutions for board appointments that
We didn't do the,
right. In your packet, there was also an application for the tree board.
right.
If you guys have had the opportunity to review that, if we could get consensus, then I can prepare a resolution for the regular meeting, so you can take action on this.
Is there anyone here from the tree board? Right here.
I'm a liaison.
Have you met with him yet?
I have not. I can say that I do know the applicant. She's a college student, lives across the street from us, a pretty passionate environmentalist, and she's got way too much energy.
Definitely. So can you draw this up for the next council meeting? Consensus on that?
Yes.
No need to vote. All right. Now the discussion of the work session schedule. This is, we talked about doing, potentially moving these to the evening for people who, work. We have 4 of us. You're retired, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Is that correct? But we have 4 of us who have day obligations, and have to take off for Fridays. Also, by moving it to the evenings and separating the Mondays out, making it be another Monday evening, it means we lose the restriction of needing to wait and put things off for a whole month sometimes on getting business done for staff. So my discussions with staff, you guys can contradict me if you want to, or if you feel differently about this, is that it would make their jobs easier if we kept things going. The public could be there. I'm making a pitch for this, is what I'm doing, if it's not obvious. I also think that and I'm directly stealing this quote from a citizen, but I think it's a good one, that our committees make or break us as a council, and make or break what happens as far as progress in the town on projects and things that we want to get done. They tend to get buried a little bit in these work sessions, because that's generally when they get to speak, and there aren't many people to hear what's going on. And if we moved the work sessions to evenings, it would be an opportunity for them to have more visibility. And I'll bring this up a little, even maybe the way we structure our meetings a little bit. I think, Amy, you and I have sat through some meetings that went way longer than they should have. I'm bringing another discussion item in right now and talking about, do you think that's okay at this point? Because I mentioned to you, I looked at several things about the way our meetings are supposed to go, and I can share with you guys the documents, but there's nothing set in stone about the structure. There's even one provision that Boyd pointed it out that says there are certain things that we're supposed to do at each meeting, but those the council can vote to not do them if it wants at the beginning of a meeting. Also, the order, believe it or not, this is one of the things that a mayor can do, is change the order, like, just because, for whatever, to facilitate the meeting. But, and I'm going to say this, not that I am, what I'm about to say wouldn't be set in stone either, but I think committee reports, we should know coming into the meeting, not get to the end of the meeting and say, does anybody have any committee reports? We should plan on the meeting coming
You mean
up.
board liaison?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We should know the meeting coming up, that Amy is going to have a report from here, and Amy should be able to say, I'm going to need 2 minutes, or I'm going to need 20 minutes. And then, we take whatever we have to. But that way we can know going into the meeting that this section's going to take about 10 or 15 minutes. And we pull it up into the meeting so that it's not at the end where it feels like there's just an open amount of time so it can go on and on. You know what I'm saying? Because maybe as we restructure the meetings, give our committees better visibility within them, but also be careful about the amount of time that we spend. So,
Do you feel like we've been spending a lot of time on board liaison reports?
no, I think
'Cause I feel like that,
they're getting short shrift,
Yeah.
I think sometimes. But the time or two when we've called a citizen in to talk,
right,
they haven't known, it's just been open-ended as to what they're going to do. I mean, I want to be careful about this, but even we've had departmental times when people have gotten up to speak, and the information is good, but there is no set time. It can just go on. And if you get somebody who just wants to go on for a long time, you don't know how long your meetings are going to last. And we're getting to the end of the meetings when people are already tired when we do that. So all I'm saying is, I want to pull the committees up higher and get an idea going in
I have no problem with that.
yeah.
Anybody else?
And this is just for discussion. Anybody?
You just want to move it to the front of the meeting?
Oh, not at the front. We can talk about it
Somewhere.
more. I'll propose it for one, but
Okay.
just so you know, I
Could
want to
it be that they could be on a rotation so that it's a scheduled update that happens so that,
Well, it
there's
needs to happen after the meetings, and this goes along with, also part of it is, it would be great to have minutes. I'd like to see the minutes from our committees posted, so that as council members, we can know what was discussed and be aware going in as to what's going on with the committees. And those need to be online, so other citizens can see, well, this is what the Parks Board is talking about, or this is what the Tree Board's talking about. And some of that, as we revamp the website, we can take care of some of those things. But it seems like some of those things could be solved now just by making our committees recognize that when you have a meeting, it's important that we get the minutes, even if they're not approved yet. One of the problems we have is some committees will meet and then maybe not meet for another 6 months. So therefore, their minutes never get approved, and there's, no one really knows what happened at that meeting except for those people. So we discussed it at the last meeting, and Phil said, it would be okay to have minutes, just not approved minutes that could be available. So anyway, just something that I hope we can fix.
Okay.
So our committees not just feel like they're more important, but that we you can't have a strategic plan if you don't have the strategic information that comes from the committees. And that's one of the things I think we need to fix. So with that in mind, how does everybody feel about the evenings for work sessions?
I would like to add something to that. I agree with you in part, if the purpose of having these meetings is to, the ability to get more done, I'm all about efficiency. I think you hear me say that a lot about, let's move through each thing and move on to the next. If we can accomplish that, I am on board with it. But if we're going to have 4-hour meetings, like we're having 4-hour day meetings because we can't get it together to be concise and efficient in the way we're doing business, then I don't want to do it at night. So I would propose that, and I know Red Bank, I talked to Carol Rose, she's a friend of mine, and, we were talking about the differences in the work sessions, and their work sessions move very smoothly. Unlike in the past, ours have gone on for hours and hours, with the exception of the budget meeting. That one has to be long. I totally am on board with that. But if we could maybe add to that, and this would be also for the citizens, so that they don't feel like they're stuck here all night, a 2-hour cap. We get what we can get done in 2 hours, and whatever we don't get done moves to the next meeting. Because
Great
after 2 hours, I just feel like our nerves are frazzled. You start to get, when there is an issue that is, maybe we're not in all agreement on, that's when kind of we start to go at, people just, there's only so much you can get done, I feel like.
I think we can do it. Obviously, we'd have to be flexible, but I think that can absolutely be, I'm comfortable with that stated goal. That's a long time. But that's one of the reasons why I think we all have to expect coming in, though, that like if we have an item on the agenda, it would be great to say, how much time do you think you need for this item?
Yeah.
You don't know, but if we could structure our meetings going in that this is about how long, we ought to be able to, the idea is not to get done as quickly as possible, but to be efficient and,
Exactly.
yeah. And that's.
But to also
yeah,
not drag out things that don't need to be dragged out.
Right.
So like, for example, if we're going to be talking about the sale of the water system, I think that's the only topic on the agenda, because that's obviously going to take up a lot of time, and there's a lot of details that need to be discussed. Something that's going to,
Sure.
I think I made my point. But
So
I'm
I don't think we can have a law, an ordinance that says the meeting, ends at 2 hours, but our goal can be 2 hours, especially if we're doing them at night. Who knows? Maybe we might find 1 month we don't need a meeting. Wouldn't that be amazing? That can happen.
Keep in mind that we do have a meeting scheduled with TDOT ahead of the January work session, which is already scheduled for this time.
Right.
So
So it'd be the February.
Yeah. Could you draw up a proposed scheduled meetings starting? That's the January, yeah, starting in February?
And what time are we talking? Like 6:30 to 8:30?
Yeah, we would do the same thing and try to have them be.
6 to 8?
6 to 8. Well, 6:30 is what we've been doing.
We also have staff, though, that's here all day and then staying.
Staff.
Staff
Yeah, I
meeting,
don't
Carol
mind being
and-
earlier. Our planning commission meetings start at 6, and I like that. So
let's do
I'm not arguing, but what are the disadvantages?
We
of
used
6?
to do them at 6, and I recall there being a lot of complaints from citizens that they couldn't get, back to the mountain from work in time for the 6 o'clock start.
Is that why it moved
I
to
mean, that
6:30, you think?
wasn't an
Well, they're
overwhelming
at
number of people or
12:30 now.
anything, but that was an issue.
Can we start at 6, and if we get complaints, we move it to 6:30? Because I
Staff,
think
what
we're
is
going to
that?
get complaints either way. We get complaints about it being at 12:30.
obviously,
So
a better scenario
can't
for
wait.
us if we start earlier, but
6 would be a better
Uh,
scenario?
I think for staff, it would be.
I think it might be, and I'll reiterate, that's better for us. But I think it might be a little confusing to have 2 night meetings, one starts at
No,
6:30, one
we'd
starts at
move them both
6.
to 6. We would move them both to 6.
So you want the regular
That's-
meeting at 6.
Yeah, well, I agree completely. You do them both at 6. They're all regular meetings at this point. It's just that you meet twice.
In that work session that becomes a regular meeting, does the format
They'd be the
change to
same
the
for
more
both.
formal?
Yeah, I would have them both be formal. Yeah. Let's get them done.
Really?
Yeah, now if we need to, like you said with the water company, if we need to have something that's a water board meeting, I think we need to do this. But that could be an outside. We can do them as scheduled, yeah. what bothers you about?
this is more comfortable, we can spread out, we're looking at each other, we're not, like, when we're up there, it's hard to communicate with each
Yeah.
other.
But it's harder for
I
citizens.
feel like we're preaching, we're like talking to an audience versus getting work done and talking to each other. But I could do it either way. It doesn't- I'm not married to either one of those ideas.
I mean, I like,
And
I
there's
kinda like
nothing that
this.
dictates the
You can't change it.
the format. If we get the time and dates established, then you can be flexible on how you want to hold the meetings. And we had discussed second and fourth Monday.
And we aren't agreeing to this right now. They're
No,
just going to
we'll-
bring that
we'll
schedule,
look
and we
at
can all take a look at the schedule and see what works.
Schedules, we can see what, and it's really something we should do anyway, is look at an annual schedule to see what conflicts there are, so we can discuss changing meetings well in advance, so it's something I hadn't thought about, so.
And I will
We'll
say, the
draft
only
everything.
caveat I can think of is, as we've discussed, is like the budget meeting would have to be a
Right.
work session during. the
That would
Still
have
have
to
to
be a
be.
daytime
Right,
meeting.
and still have to be. a day.
We cannot do that at night.
No, because it's an all-day, so.
All-nighter. All right, we're about to the end of this thing. I apologize for not putting this on at the beginning, but the MOA for the Signal Mountain Elementary Preservation Fund should have been under the discussion items. So Boyd, you want to just fill everybody in as to what it is?
Sure. We'll pass one to Carol that way. This is, if you'll recall, we had the Signal Mountain Elementary Preservation Fund had proposed to assume operational control of MAC. And we started working on that prospect, and then ultimately it changed course. So we've gone back now and really kind of fashioned this after what we did with the Library Foundation, so that we simply are giving them authority to raise funds for the benefit of the building, and how they can solicit using the town's name and on benefit for the benefit of the town, and what they can do on town property. And on the second page, there's a couple of things already listed there, but we need to give some thought to any additional projects that we would want to give them standing authority for. And they've asked about just adding on their, repairs to floor, ceilings, and walls, something like that they could just do. And considering the scope of it, that's something that I could approve along the way, or we could go ahead and list that in here. But this is something that we've worked on, and it will could come up on our next agenda for action, so
Yeah, that's an
this is
important
just a
point. We're not-
review and discussion.
Yeah, since you guys are just seeing this now, me too, we can look at this and see if we have other questions about it, to give everybody a chance to digest it, but I'd like to put it on the agenda.
One of the bullet points, I think, should be allowing them to make general improvements to the facility. Bo mentioned walls, ceilings, that kind of thing, but that seems to me to be in their purview.
Yeah, and I don't want to steal the thunder. As part of this, at the next meeting, it would be, at least in the citizens' opportunity to speak, it would be nice to get an update on the mailer that went out, in case anybody didn't get them. I had some envelopes out here. So, anybody in the audience that didn't get one either, this is the mailer that went out, and they're currently trying to raise, did you guys all get them?
I think I
Boyd,
did
you ever
get that.
yours?
I don't know.
Yeah.
My wife,
I did not.
You did
Generally
not
gets
get
to
to take one of
I'd
those,
like to
yeah.
put one in the record.
So they're
Can I see that-
approaching,
one of those, please?
they're approaching halfway, the goal of 40,000 for the heat and air system.
Wow, that's great.
It's approaching halfway, and there was no expense to all the money that's coming in, every penny that's coming in goes towards that project. None for the cost of the mailer. Everybody involved in the SME Preservation Fund chipped in and did their part to pay for all of it. So it's 100% of what comes in is going to that, and they're getting close to 20,000 already. So that's why this MOA is important, and I think we need to have this done, you know, at the next meeting. So I have nothing else on that. There's some, you know, in looking through it, I have some things I want to talk to you about, Boyd, just about the mechanics of it, like, oh, and it does mention the logo in there. Can we just go ahead and cover that? Because they aren't, I've done variations of these logos also, I mean, with different kinds of words around the circle and stuff, but never does it say the town of Signal Mountain. But it mentions in this that the town has to approve. Do we have any, we don't need action on that, right?
No, I mean, what I'd like, if those are the logos that you're going to use, something as informal as this, and as long as everybody's good with it, I mean, it's
Everybody good with
obviously a
that?
representation of our building.
I need a copy of that to put in the record, though, if
Yeah.
you're going to
Yeah, you can have this one.
make a
And
decision.
there will be, you know, umpteen variations of this, but it's basically gonna, you know, sometimes it'll have words around the outside, you know, depending on what's going on, but.
And that's something to be as simple as sending it, have them send it to me, and if it's something I have concern with, then it can come to council. If it's straightforward, it's straightforward.
All right, anything else on that? Board liaison reports. The planning commission met, and we may not meet this week because we have nothing on there, but from our last meeting, let me find.
So would that mean you'd meet in February?
Basically,
I
what
know.
happened.
I was like, I didn't even know when the meetings were. I guess I should ask that question.
There's 6, you know that now, yeah. There's 6 and they're the first Thursday, 6 and first Thursday. We had a modification to the Wind Tree subdivision expansion that came up last time, and it had to do, if I remember correctly, with a right-of-way and a cul-de-sac, and nothing consequential. That
Well, basically, we got them to change it to avoid a scenario like we just dealt with on Georgia, because
Yeah, same
there was going to be a unopened future right-of-way, and we had them incorporate that into the remaining property.
That's right, that
So
one I
that
was-
property has access, but it's nothing that we have any responsibility for, so it was of benefit to the town for that change.
Library boards, my other one, library board did not meet in December, so.
I don't know if you consider the TPO to be a board, but we just recently met, I think it was on the 13th of this month. And it was kind of an interesting meeting. The technical coordinating committee on which Loretta sits had the opportunity to rank various projects that were part of the Improve Act. And the improvements to what on here, I put a little arrow on everybody's sheet, is considered State Route 8, are part of that Improve Act. And that's why TDOT's coming to meet with us at the end of January. But what was a little shocking was they asked us just to vote on what the TCC put forward in terms of ranking. And the ranking system this year was different from how it was ranked last year. Last year, our project was considered a 2 in priority.
What's the highest?
I'm sorry?
What's the ranking system? 2 being?
2 being one of 2 ranks that were. I'm sorry? A 1 or a 2. So we were already at 2, but then they voted this year, and if I go off track, Loretta, throw me under the bus here, but they ranked them from like 1 to 10, and our project ended up next to last, actually 1 to 11. And so when called upon to vote on that ranking, both Bill Trohannis and I objected, and we were given the opportunity to send our thoughts as to why we objected and to why we think the project for the highway should have a greater priority. Now, TDOT will take this ranking into consideration, not as a sole factor in how quickly a project gets done, but it will just be one of many components, foremost of which is safety. And they already know about all the safety.
And they're on
issues,
that
but-
already.
But I just wanted to pass along to everybody that the project is on the radar. They're coming to talk to us about it. And Leonard, I believe the funding through the Improve Act is already committed.
For
So,
this, for the rockfall mitigation?
yeah. And the slope stabilization, drainage issues, excuse me, are part of that larger project. And the two areas that were just, most recently repaired were also part of that larger project. But were considered more of an emergency maintenance issue rather than the whole project.
It'd be interesting to ask TDOT what weight they give the TPP ranking.
Well, and there's, from my experience, there's always been a rep from TDOT, a regional rep at the TPO meetings, and there was at this meeting. And he clearly said that we just looked at this as one of many factors.
Okay.
But what I objected about, the reason I objected is that it's a lot more important to us and to everybody on Walden's Ridge than it is to the city of Chattanooga, who usually gets the highest priority in everything. So we'll know a whole lot better. I think it's, what is it, January 28th?
Yeah, 27, 28.
But just wanted to pass that along. to everyone.
25th.
Loretta, did you have anything to add to those comments?
If you do, would you come up here, please?
It's 26, right?
What? January work
Friday,
session?
Friday, January 26th.
5th,
5th.
25th.
26th is Saturday.
Oh, I'm in 2018, sorry. It's a whole different year.
I wasn't there when they did with the ranking. I missed that meeting. Kyle went before me and just, told me what had happened. And then I think TDOT now is doing a whole different type of survey on safety issues. And it seems to be based more on interstate travel, and fatalities and those sorts of things. And that's figuring into their funding as well. So I really don't know why we ranked as we did, what factors caused that to lower it. But it seems to me most of the things that are coming out from Federal Highway Association administration has to do with interstate travel. And so we don't ever rank in those things, interstate travel, fatalities, and trucking seem to be the big marks for Federal Highways.
Thinking back to that meeting we had a couple of years ago in here, it sounded like this whole project, they didn't come to ask our opinion as to what we wanted them to do on that project. They came to tell us this is what's going to happen. And in there, this is what's going to happen. Rock mitigation, steep slope, those things were all talked about. So I'm of the opinion that what they're going to tell us in January, this is just a guess, is that this is what we're doing, and this is where we are in it. We've already done this, and this is what's going to be next.
Yeah, I think what will, I think they'll probably go into greater detail than
Okay.
that. Likely with an explanation as to what rockfall mitigation looks like. And that's typically putting those soil nails into the cliff.
Or the
I don't know if
fence,
if
like
you-
they do in Monteagle.
ever travel US 64 through the
Yeah.
Ocoee Gorge, where they had the big rock fall by the dam, you'll see these big bolts sticking out of the rock, and they're not, I hardly notice them anymore, but they're not the prettiest thing.
Right.
And we can't afford to let happen what happened in the early 90s. So when they tell us what it is, how it is they're going to do it, I think we as a council need to get way out in front of it in terms of discussion with our residents.
Yeah, it's going to be ugly.
Yeah, and hopefully not. I think that council way back in the 90s didn't do anything to get out in front of it. They just, TDOT scheduled a public meeting and.
Yeah, I didn't mean our participation ugly. I mean the bolt sticking out of the rocks.
Oh, yeah.
The way the rock face is going to look. But sure.
But yeah, I think that's what they're going to tell us is what the level of scope of the work is going to be for the
Excellent.
project. Because I think this was several years ago when they laid out different projects that could happen on the front, and one was many millions of dollars, and they had different scope of work and what they were going to do, and this was the preventative maintenance choice that they had. And so I think what they're going to do is then come and tell us exactly what they're going to do as far as solving the drainage problem and the rock mitigation and maybe a schedule and those sorts of things. So I'm hoping. But, as far as our projects being rated with the TPO, I think is based on, we may have rated lower just because we're so isolated up here and small. And they are thinking federal highway money and interstates and truck traffic and fatalities and all those sorts of things.
It's interesting that the only project that rated lower than ours was expansion to 3 lanes from Interstate 59 into downtown. And, that's an area that everybody complains about.
That was ranked low?
I'm sorry?
What, are you, you're,
It was ranked lower than
It
ours.
ranked lower than ours, yeah. It was bizarre. And of course,
really don't get that.
I-75, I-24 split was right up at.
Well, and they're doing that one now. All right, well, that's it. Yeah, is that it on there? Amy? Nobody's met? Susanna?
I'm going to my first MAC meeting at the end of January, so.
All right, managers report.
You've seen a lot of my work here between the water stuff for MTS and the coyote issue. Spent a lot of research time this last few weeks. James Boulevard project is moving along. Well, we've had some complaints, but we've been able to address those. And I think it's moving along very well, actually. The Shoal Creek Falls Bridge project is also moving. They're probably next week or the following at the latest. We expect the water line tap to be made to provide temporary service, and then the traffic flow to be moved over to the temporary road over to Alt.
I have a question about that. Will there be a stop sign?
Yes. Coming out of there onto Alt, yes.
Okay.
We've already, we addressed that. So that's moving forward. You mentioned Windtree. Been working with them. I have the development agreement drafted, and we've run into some issues with the bonding. The way they're proceeding, they would need to get just a reclamation bond so that if they grade the road and they dig the ditches and all that, and then it stops, we have to be able to go in there and reclaim that land and stabilize it. From what they're saying, those are very difficult to get now, so they're looking to do a completion bond that would basically cover all the phases, and Phil's comfortable with that, and I've sent him the sample language for that, so we're working on making sure we get the right bonding in place.
Is that something he's seeing in other places as well, from other developers?
I don't know.
Okay.
I told them that there are other methods for surety on that, irrevocable standing letter of credit that they could provide, and they wanted to do bonding, and getting that reclamation bond for $60,000, just nobody wants to write something like that anymore. So this is a more extensive bond. So as long as it's covering the bases we need covered, as long as what it's called may not be as big a deal. We just need to make sure that it is
Exactly.
accomplishing what the subdivision regs require. So I expect to have that nailed down next week, and then we'll have that project up and running as well. And that's pretty much it.
As we've gone along today, we've added agenda items. Anybody else have any other thing to be added? I had a slew of other business, but nothing is pressing. Anybody else have anything you want to add? Let me look just to make sure I'm clear. None of these we have to talk about right now, but at some point, it'd be great if we talked about a strategic plan as a council for the town. It's something that Susanna had mentioned, in running. Oh, we do need to talk about this one, because while the light was on the road going down the mountain, Shoal Creek Road was kept open, and now that the light is gone, I've heard from both sides, people saying, sure would be nice if that started closing again. Why is it still open? Because it's closed on weekends. A lot of people walk. That's pretty heavily used. And we've also heard from people saying, sure is nice that that's not being closed and it can be kept open. So the town has to make a decision as to whether or not it's going to start closing that again.
On Sundays?
On Sundays, yeah.
From what, 1 to 5?
I think
I mean,
that's right, yeah.
I think we should encourage people to get outside and
Any other thoughts?
enjoy nature. That's a beautiful stretch of road.
Yeah.
It's a nice little hike.
It is.
It's a nice hike and people use it
And
on
it's
a
good
regular
for
basis.
little kids on their little bikes if
Yeah.
they want to and whatever. I think,
So why did it change? We were closing it,
Well, they
and
kept it
then we had
open.
the light and they kept it open, and why didn't we revert back to the way it was
That's
before
what we're
we had the light?
discussing now.
So let's revert it back to the way it was.
Boyd's heard the opposite.
Yeah, we've heard, and I don't think it was really a conscious decision so much as it just, we stopped doing it, and then when the construction was over, you didn't really think about it until we literally had people from both sides going, well, are you gonna start closing it again? And just like Dan said, and then the next day somebody called and go, you're not gonna start closing that again, are you?
Yeah, I
So
don't
it's
think
just,
you're gonna,
let's make sure the council's
Yeah.
comfortable with
Can,
whatever we do.
a suggestion would be, can we make this decision at the next council meeting? Now that we've talked about it, so that people, if anybody would like to come to citizens' comments and say, my life is endangered because you closed this, or my life is ruined because you're not closing it, or, is that okay?
fine with me.
It's just one more weekend, and then we can make the decision. Or we could close it this weekend. And
let's
then-
close it this weekend
Yeah,
and
and
see
then
what
talk
happens
about
on
it next week.
Monday.
That's a good compromise.
Good idea.
Because I think that's gonna be one of those issues.
Well, I think it ought to be closed.
It's,
Yeah.
we're not gonna please everyone, but if
Right.
that's the way we've been doing it for a really long time, then there's no sense in changing it because we forgot to do it when we got rid of the light. I mean,
It
it's
is
just
good, though,
silly
because there are
to me.
opinions that you don't know, to give, to hear people make their arguments, as opposed to just us deciding. But we have to
Right,
to
some
decide
things we have to
eventually.
just decide though.
That was really the only thing that was, and I want to apologize for the last meeting about the invocation. It was one of those, I didn't know that Stacy was here, and as I was standing up, and I kind of already had my notes as everything I was going to do, I was like, uh-oh. So we'll do it differently next time. I think I read to Boyd what the Hamilton County Commission puts on their paperwork for their meetings that says something that the invocation is not representing the religious beliefs of anyone in particular, and that people are invited, other people are invited to come do this if they want to. And one of the things I found in looking into the invocation is that it's done, the reason where it falls before roll call is because it also is written into it, it's pretty common protection that anyone who would be offended by being there for an invocation, the meeting doesn't officially start till the roll call. So it's something that takes place prior to the official start of business. So, anyway, just to put that out there for anybody who is watching this or reads the minutes, that if other people from other faiths would like to speak, they're welcome to. And what's the process for that? They contact you?
Just contact me, and if council doesn't have any objections, and we don't, then
We don't.
we would schedule it.
Yeah, okay. So my apologies to Stacy, because I didn't know what the process was. Anything else? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Goodbye.
Hope you feel better. Hope you feel better.